After I bought a luxury house, my husband said his parents and divorced sister were moving in. When I refused, he snapped, "It's my house, you use my money. Object again, and you're out." But when he showed up with them, they froze at what they saw. The moment my husband threatened to kick me out of my own house, I did not cry. I did not throw anything. I did not scream. I did not call my best friend or my mother or anyone who would tell me to calm down. Give him time. Think about the marriage. I set down my coffee cup, carefully, quietly, on the kitchen island we had chosen together 3 weeks earlier from a showroom in Bethesda, and I looked at the man I had been married to for 4 years, and I thought one very clear thought: he has no idea what I do for a living. That was the moment everything changed. Not when he told me his parents were moving in. Not when he added his newly divorced sister like a footnote. Not even when he said, voice hard and flat as pavement, "Object again, and I will kick you out." It was the moment I realized he had been looking at me for 4 years, possibly longer, and seeing someone entirely different from who I actually was. He thought he was threatening a woman who needed him. He was wrong. I need to back up, because you need to understand what led to that kitchen, that coffee cup, that moment. My name is Emily Voss. I'm 36 years old, and I've spent the last decade as a software architect, building back-end infrastructure for fintech companies. It is not glamorous work to describe at dinner parties. People's eyes go polite and distant when I say it, and they nod like they understand, and they move on to someone more interesting. That's fine. I have never needed people to find my work interesting. I have only needed it to pay well. It pays very well. 3 years before the house, I had co-founded a small SaaS company with 2 colleagues I trusted, a compliance tool for mid-sized financial firms. Boring, essential, wildly profitable in a niche market. We sold it 18 months ago to a larger firm for a number I don't share freely, but which, after taxes and splits, left me with enough to buy a house outright, fully funded, no mortgage. Ryan knew about the sale. He celebrated it with me. We had a nice dinner, and he toasted to our future, and I smiled and thought, yes, this is it. This is what we've been working toward. Ryan Kellerman was a commercial loan officer at a regional bank. Good job, solid salary. He wore his success like a well-fitted jacket, always adjusting the lapels slightly. He talked about his bonus the way some men talk about their golf handicap, frequently with casual pride, as though the number itself was proof of something about his character. I had no reason to check. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I had no reason to check anything, because I trusted him, and trust, by definition, is the decision not to verify. We bought the house in October, a 4-bedroom colonial in a quiet neighborhood in Northern Virginia, mature trees along the driveway, a kitchen I genuinely loved, a backyard that reminded me of the house I grew up in. I paid the down payment, $412,000, from my account. Ryan had suggested we use a joint account for house expenses going forward, which seemed practical, which was why I added him as an authorized user on an account I used for large transfers without blinking, because he was my husband, and I trusted him. We got the keys on a Friday evening. We ordered pizza and sat on the floor of the empty living room and talked about paint colors and where to put the sectional. Ryan put his arm around me and said, "We built something." I believed him. 2 nights later, he destroyed it in a single sentence. "My parents are moving in," he said. Sunday morning, coffee, both of us in the kitchen, not looking at me, tone like he was reading a weather forecast. "And Heather, she needs a fresh start." I know that moment. I've replayed it so many times that I've memorized the texture of it, the way the light was coming through the window, the half-drunk mug in my hand, the particular quality of the silence that opened up after he said it. Heather was his sister, 41, recently divorced, recently relocated, recently, in my experience, the recipient of whatever accommodation the family had decided she needed. Linda and Frank Kellerman were his parents. Linda, meticulous and territorial, who had never fully accepted that her son had married someone who wasn't deferential enough. Frank, a retired contractor who said almost nothing but occupied space with the expansive confidence of a man who had never been told no by anyone he respected. "Your sister," I said, "the one who just got divorced." "Don't start, Emily." "I'm not starting. I'm asking why you didn't talk to me first." He looked up then, and I saw something in his face that I'd glimpsed before, briefly, in other moments, in conversations that ended too quickly. A coolness, an assessment, as if he were calculating something. "Because it's not your call," he said. I set the coffee cup down. "I paid for this house. With my money," he said. His voice didn't rise. That was what made it worse. "I've been funding everything. Your little software sale means nothing. I've been carrying this family. Object again, and I will kick you out." I stared at him, waiting for the qualifier, the backpedal, I don't mean that. It didn't come. He left at 6:45 a.m. to pick them up from the airport. The door clicked shut, and I stood in my kitchen. My kitchen, my house, purchased with my money, in my name alone. And I let myself be still for exactly 90 seconds. Then I opened my laptop. I want to be precise about the timeline because it matters. 6:47 a.m. I pulled every document from my cloud storage. The title, the deed, the wire confirmations, the closing statement. My name, only mine, on every page. Ryan had never been listed. I had not done this strategically. It was simply how the purchase had unfolded. But standing in the kitchen at 6:47 in the morning after my husband had threatened to remove me from my own house, I was very glad I'd paid close attention at closing. 7:15 a.m. I called Marcus Webb. Marcus Webb is a family and property attorney with 19 years of practice in Northern Virginia, who had been referred to me by a colleague colleague before the purchase specifically because, as my colleague said, he's the kind of lawyer you want in your corner before you need him. I had retained him briefly during the purchase for a title review. He answered on the second ring because Marcus Webb is the kind of attorney who answers on the second ring. I told him what Ryan had said. I told him about the house. I told him about the joint account. He listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I have always appreciated about Marcus. Send me everything, he said. Title, deed, every document. I'll draft a notice of trespass authorization. If he returns with family members and refuses to leave, you have legal standing to call police. The house is yours, Emily. He has no claim. He mentioned marital property. He said he'd tie it up in court. He can claim what he wants. The purchase predates any joint account activity. The down payment was documented from your sole account, and his name isn't on the deed. He has an argument to make to a judge. He doesn't have a winning one. A pause. Pull your bank records. The joint account. Pull everything. 7:52 a.m. I pulled the joint account records. The account I had opened for house expenses. The account Ryan had access to. I want to tell you there was a dramatic moment. That I gasped. That I dropped my phone. That something cinematic happened. There wasn't. I sat at the kitchen island in yesterday's clothes, and I scrolled through the transaction history with the same flat attention I apply to code reviews, looking for anomalies, flagging what didn't fit. The anomalies were not subtle. October 4th, transfer, family support, $10,000. October 9th, transfer, family support, $8,500. October 14th, transfer, family support, $12,000. October 21st, transfer, family support, $8,100. On and on, all labeled family support, as though that phrase were a legitimate budget category. All made in the 6 weeks since he'd been added as an authorized user. All made without a word to me. I called the bank at 8:01 a.m. and asked for a full accounting. $38,640. Gone. I did not scream. I noticed my jaw was clenched and I consciously unclenched it. I noticed my hands were cold and I put them flat on the counter to ground them. I breathed through my nose 4 counts, out through my mouth the way my therapist had taught me 2 years ago when I was managing a company acquisition and running on 4 hours of sleep. Then I thought, the bonus. Ryan had mentioned the bonus 9 times in the last year. 9 times that I could specifically recall because I have a precise memory and I had noticed, without quite registering why, that he mentioned it the way people mention something they want you to believe. His year-end bonus. The one that had funded our lifestyle. The one he'd held up once during an argument about finances as evidence of his contribution. I went to my filing cabinet and I found the paperwork Ryan had signed when we bought our last car, a 2022 Audi A5, mostly his vehicle, which included an authorization for credit and employment verification. I was not certain the authorization extended to what I was doing. I consulted a law website for 11 minutes. Then I called his HR department. I did not cause a scene. I was polite and professional and I asked one specific question. Could they confirm the details of Ryan Kellerman's most recent performance bonus for my records as we were completing a joint financial disclosure? There was a pause. The representative said she'd need to follow up in writing. The email arrived at 9:34 a.m. Per our records, Mr. Kellerman has not received a performance bonus in the current or prior fiscal year. I printed it. I read it twice. I added it to the folder. No bonus. Not in over a year. The money he'd claimed was funding our life. That money either didn't exist or had come from somewhere I hadn't examined yet. The transfers from my account. The fabricated narrative. A man building a financial fiction on the foundation of my trust and my actual money. I pressed print again, and then I went to find a thick black marker. By noon, I had done 5 things. Marcus Webb had drafted the trespass notice and emailed it as a PDF. Official letterhead, precise language, Ryan's full name. I printed 2 copies. I had changed the smart lock code on every entry point. New 8-digit code that I had not written down anywhere except in my own memory. I had photographed every document in the folder. Deed, closing statement, wire confirmation, bank transfers with the totals circled in red, the HR email, the trespass notice. I uploaded them to my personal cloud storage and to an encrypted backup drive I kept in my home office. I had called my friend Diane, who is not an attorney, but is a forensic accountant with 12 years of experience in financial fraud investigation, and told her what I'd found. She listened and said, in her careful, measured way, Emily, what you're describing, the account access, the pattern of transfers, the misrepresentation about the bonus, that's not marital financial management. That's financial abuse, potentially theft by deception, depending on how he represented those funds to you. I let that land. I know, I said. Do you want me to look at the transfers formally? Not yet, but be ready. And then I did the 5th thing. I wrote Ryan's name on the front of a manila envelope in thick black marker, and I put inside it the deed, the bank records with totals circled, the HR email, and a copy of the trespass notice. And I taped it to the foyer wall, at eye level, at a height a man of Ryan's stature would see immediately upon entering. Then I changed into clean clothes, made a second cup of coffee, and waited. They arrived at 4:17 p.m. I was watching from the upstairs window, I will not pretend otherwise, when the black Chevy Suburban pulled up the driveway. Ryan stepped out first, in the way he always stepped out of cars, shoulders rolling back like he was arriving somewhere he owned. Linda Kellerman followed with the enormous designer tote she carried everywhere, the one with the gold hardware she had mentioned the price of more than once. Frank, in his his gray golf cap, hands in his jacket pockets. The patient posture of a man who had spent 40 years watching his wife and son arrange the world around themselves, and Heather, dragging two very large rolling suitcases with the energy of a woman who had made a decision and was daring anyone to unmake it. I walked downstairs. I heard Ryan enter the keypad code at the front door. The lock chimed, stayed closed. He tried again. Chime, closed. I heard Linda's voice, slightly elevated. Ryan? I opened the door from the inside. They were arranged on my front porch, all four of them, in a tableau that I will honestly never forget as long as I live. Ryan's hand was still raised toward the keypad. Linda's smile had gone uncertain at the edges. Frank was looking at the door with the expression of a man recalibrating. Heather was squinting at me. I stepped back. Behind me, bare floors, empty walls, hollow silence where furniture had never yet been placed because we'd only had the keys 2 days. The house echoed, except for the envelope on the foyer wall. Ryan's eyes went to it immediately. Something moved across his face. Recognition, and beneath it, something that might have been the first faint arrival of fear. He pushed past me. He grabbed the envelope. He tore it open with the specific violence of a man who is hoping the contents are not what he suspects. He pulled the papers out. Silence. The deed first. He stared at it. I watched him look for his name, not find it, look again. The bank transfers, circled in red, the totals. The label family support repeating down the page. The HR email. 2 sentences. The trespass notice. His full name at the top. He was very still for a long moment. This is insane, he said. Voice controlled. Working to stay controlled. You can't do this. I already did. Frank was looking at his son. The expression on his face was not the one I expected. It wasn't defending or dismissing. It was something slower and heavier. He said quietly, Ryan, you told us this house was yours. Dad, Linda snatched the papers from Ryan's hand. She has always been a woman who takes information into her own hands. I watched her scan the deed, watched her eyes move to the bank transfers, watched the hardening happen in real time, the social performance of wounded mother giving way to something more pragmatic, a woman doing math. $38,000, she said. Ryan's voice changed register, higher, defensive, the voice he used when he'd been caught at something and needed to reframe it quickly. I was taking care of everyone. I needed the money. That was my money, I said, from my account. Heather had stepped back slightly. She was looking at her brother with an expression I hadn't expected from her. Not outrage exactly, but something quieter and older, like a recognition she'd been postponing. You stole from her? I didn't steal. I was managing our finances. You drained my account, I said, and you told me for a year that your bonus was funding our life. I have an email from your HR department that says you haven't received a bonus in 14 months. The silence that followed was very complete. Ryan's face moved through several expressions in rapid succession. I watched it happen, almost clinically, the way you watch a system fail in sequence. First the calculation, looking for an exit, then something that wanted to be anger but couldn't quite sustain itself, then beneath all of it, the beginning of understanding, that I had not been the person he had been managing, that I had been paying attention the entire time. He stepped forward, crowding the threshold, using his height, his physical presence, a technique I had seen him use before in arguments, though always softly, always with enough deniability that I'd told myself I was being oversensitive. Let us in, Emily, right now. No. You want to do this? I will come back with a lawyer. I called mine this morning, I said. His name is Marcus Webb. He has 19 years of family and property law experience in this state. He already knows your name, and he already has copies of everything in that envelope. Ryan went still. Then his voice dropped. Smooth, deliberate. The voice he used when he wanted something and had decided charm wasn't working. The down payment came from an account we both had access to. That makes it marital money. You understand that? I will tie this house up in litigation for years. You won't be able to sell it, refinance it, do anything with it. The down payment was wired from an account that existed before our marriage, I said. The proceeds of a company sale that was completed in my name alone. The joint account was opened after the purchase was complete. I had spoken to Marcus about exactly this, at exactly this level of specificity, 3 hours earlier. You're welcome to make that argument to a judge. I took out my phone. Ryan watched me dial. I called the non-emergency police line. I gave my address. I said, I have individuals at my residence who have been informed in writing that they are trespassing. They are refusing to leave. I'm requesting a patrol unit. I said it calmly, the way I close a loop in a code base. Precisely without drama, because drama is inefficiency. Ryan looked at me like I'd become someone he'd never met. Maybe I had. 2 patrol cars came up the hill at 4:38 p.m. Officer Daniela Ramirez stepped out first. 7 years with the county, based on the badge number and the way she moved, which was with the unhurried authority of someone who had seen every variation of this scene before and found all of them equally manageable. Her partner, Officer James Dwyer, circled the second car with his hands loose at his sides. Ryan arranged his posture immediately. The composed, reasonable man posture, shoulders back, face open, the posture of someone who has never been doubted by authority and doesn't expect to start. Linda arranged her expression into dignified confusion. Heather had been crying quietly for the last several minutes, with the specific quality of tears that suggested she had learned at some point that crying in front of people produced results. Officer Ramirez looked at me. Just me. Are you the homeowner? Yes. I handed her the folder. Deed. Closing statement. Attorney notice. My name is the only name on the title. My husband is not listed. She took the folder. She did not skim it. She read it. it. I appreciated that. Ryan stepped forward. Officer, this is a domestic misunderstanding. My wife is being— Sir, Ramirez did not look up from the papers. I'll be with you in a moment. He stopped. Dwyer turned to Ryan, patient and entirely unimpressed. Do you have documentation, sir? Deed, lease, anything showing your right to be at this address? Ryan's mouth opened, closed, opened again. It's marital property, he said. She's my wife. We live here together. Sir, Dwyer said. Documentation. Nothing came out. Ramirez looked up from the folder. She looked at me. Something in her face didn't change, but I felt, briefly, the specific human warmth of someone who has processed a situation and made a determination. She turned to Ryan and his family. You've been served with a trespass notice by the documented sole owner of this property, she said. You're not on the deed. You don't have authorization to be here. You need to leave the premises. This is my marriage, Ryan said, and his voice finally cracked. Not into grief, but into something uglier. The sound of a man who has run out of leverage and hasn't yet accepted it. You can't let her throw me out of my own. It's not your home, sir, Ramirez said, simply. I need you to step off the property. Dwyer asked me quietly whether I wanted them removed. All of them, I said. Heather wailed at a volume that suggested practice. Linda began speaking to Frank in the rigid undertone of a woman processing an enormous recalibration in real time. Frank was silent, looking at the ground, and I still think, that Frank had possibly understood something about his son for a long time without ever deciding to say it. Ryan stood at the base of my front steps and looked up at me with everything he had left, which, by that point, wasn't much. You think you won, he said. I looked at him for a moment. He was handsome still. He had always been handsome, and I had always found that handsome face reassuring in ways I was now reassessing. He looked diminished, standing at the base of the steps with the Kellerman family arrayed behind him, all four of them stripped of the narrative he'd constructed. I said. You picked the wrong woman to threaten. Officer Ramirez walked him to the end of the driveway, and I stepped back inside my house, and closed the door. My phone buzzed at 4:52 p.m. Marcus Webb, emergency hearing confirmed. Court date set for November 14th. Also, we need to talk about the transfers. I'm referring you to someone. The someone was Carol Hutchins, a forensic accountant with 22 years of experience, who had consulted on 11 financial fraud cases in the greater DC area, 3 of which had resulted in criminal charges. Marcus had worked with her on a previous case and trusted her completely. I met Carol in her office 4 days later. She reviewed the account history, the transfer records, the documentation I'd assembled, and the timeline I'd constructed. She was quiet for a long time, turning pages. This is a pattern, she said. Not impulse, not one mistake. This is someone who identified an access point and exploited it systematically over several weeks. She looked up. Did he ever tell you what the money was for, specifically? I told her about the family support labels, about the story he'd told me, that he handled the accounts, that his bonus was covering our expenses, that I didn't need to watch the numbers because he was watching them. That's the tell, she said. The labels are plausible enough to wave off if someone notices. The narrative exists to discourage the noticing. She set the papers down. Emily, in my professional opinion, this constitutes financial fraud. What he told you about the bonus, combined with unauthorized transfers from an account you reasonably believed to be for household use, we're talking about potential theft by deception. She submitted her findings to Marcus as a formal professional report. Exhibit C in what would become a substantial filing. What happened after that happened in stages. And I want to be honest with you, it was not clean, and it was not fast. And there were days during the next 4 months when I sat in the house by myself and felt the particular weight of having been wrong about someone for 4 years. That weight is real. I want to name it, because the internet loves a victory story, and sometimes flattens the parts that don't fit neatly into victory. I had loved Ryan. Not perfectly, not without reservations I should have examined more closely, but genuinely. I had trusted him with access to my money, and he had taken $38,000 and told me a story about it. And that specific betrayal, the casual ease of the lie, the confidence that I wouldn't look, was the part that sat heaviest. But here's what also happened. The court date was November 14th. Ryan arrived with a lawyer from a firm I'd never heard of, which Marcus assessed in about 30 seconds as a firm that handled volume work at reduced rates. Ryan had claimed in his filing that the down payment constituted marital funds, that he had contributed substantially to the household, and that the property should be treated as shared marital assets. Marcus presented the deed, the wire transfer from my sole premarital account, the account opening date of the joint account, which was 19 days after the closing, Carol Hutchins's forensic report, classified as Exhibit C, which documented the $38,000 in transfers and assessed them as a systematic, unauthorized withdrawal pattern inconsistent with agreed household management, and the HR confirmation, Exhibit D, showing no bonus paid. Ryan's lawyer made the marital property argument. The judge, the Honorable Patricia Delgado, family court, 11 years on the bench, asked 3 questions. The third question was whether Ryan had documentation showing he had contributed to the down payment or the purchase price of the home in any amount. He did not. Judge Delgado ruled the property as my sole asset. She also noted, for the record, that the financial documentation presented gave her significant concern about the account transfers and referred the matter to the county's financial crimes unit for review. That referral took 6 weeks to become an investigation. The investigation took another 2 months. Ryan Kellerman was charged with 1 count of theft by deception deception and 1 count of fraudulent misrepresentation, the latter relating specifically to the documented false claims about his bonus that had informed my financial decisions. His lawyer negotiated. He avoided jail time, barely, with a deferred sentence, mandatory repayment of the full $38,640, and 2 years of supervised probation. His employer, upon learning of the charges, and this is the part I did not plan for, did not ask for, and did not engineer, placed him on administrative leave pending an internal review of his loan officer files. 2 months later, he was terminated. I did not call his employer. I did not contact them. I want to be clear about that. What happened to his career happened because a man who had been managing other people's financial assets had been charged with financial fraud, and those two facts exist in the same professional universe and do not coexist comfortably. I found out through a mutual contact who texted me, "Did you hear about Ryan?" I read it once. I didn't respond. I've been living in the house for 8 months now. I painted the kitchen a warm cream color that I chose myself from a swatch book I brought home alone on a Tuesday evening, sitting on the floor in the empty room the way Ryan and I had sat on the first night. Except this time, I sat alone and I took my time and I chose what I actually wanted. The sectional is in the living room. I bought it myself. It's the one I'd wanted originally, before Ryan suggested something more neutral, a deep rust orange that is not neutral at all, that the morning light hits in a way that makes me happy every single time I come downstairs. Heather, as I understand it, ended up staying with Linda and Frank for several months. I don't follow the family's movements, and I have no wish to. I harbor no particular feeling about Heather, who was mostly a passenger in her brother's plan, and who looked, standing on my porch that afternoon, like someone who was surprised to learn the floor wasn't solid. I see Dr. Angela Moore every other Tuesday. She's a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in financial trauma and relationship coercion. Marcus had referred me to her, which I appreciated. I have, in those sessions, done a significant amount of thinking about trust, and about the difference between trust and compliance, and about the version of myself that had signed a joint account authorization without examining it because examination felt like suspicion and suspicion felt like a failure of love. I'm still working through that. I think I'll be working through it for a while, but here is what I know from the other side of all of it. I know that on a Sunday morning in October, a man looked at me across a kitchen island and decided I was manageable. He had decided this, I think, much earlier, but that morning was when he said it out loud, when the mask dropped enough for me to see the architecture beneath it. He thought he knew what I was. He had cataloged me, agreeable, trusting, the kind of woman who makes room. He had decided that the software sale was a windfall I didn't fully understand, that my money was an asset he could root toward his purposes, that the house was an opportunity dressed up as a marriage. He was right about the agreeable part. I had been agreeable. I had made room. He was wrong about what that meant, because agreeable is not the same as unaware. Patient is not the same as powerless. And the woman who sat at a kitchen island at 6:47 in the morning, stone still and cold-handed, pulling documents and running numbers and calling her attorney, that woman had always been there. He just hadn't bothered to look. The $38,000 came back in full, in a court-ordered transfer, 6 months after the hearing. I received the confirmation on a Wednesday afternoon, sitting at my desk in the home office, my home office, with the rust orange sectional visible through the doorway and the autumn light doing something beautiful on the back wall. I read the confirmation. I filed it in a folder labeled closed, and then I went back to work.